Hello and welcome to World Focus. I'm Blaise Bonpane, your host. I'm very fortunate today to have Clay Claiborne as a guest. Clay Claiborne has just produced an amazing film, which is called Vietnam, American Holocaust. Thanks for being with us, Clay.
Thank you.
How did you happen to make this film?
I really felt the need to put the story of the Vietnam War in the context of our current occupations in Iraq and Afghanistan, and to reprise a lot of the old material and bring in some new material that had been coming out over 40 years that really had not been put together in a documentary.
I think the word Holocaust is very important.
I think so.
There was a Holocaust in the Third Reich that took the lives of 6 million people, and it wasn't singular. There are many Holocausts.
That's right, yeah.
Vietnam was a Holocaust. Iraq is a Holocaust.
Exactly.
Central America was a Holocaust.
I think I used the term Holocaust for two reasons. First, to bring home the gravity of the situation, the intensity of the violence that was the Vietnam War, because we really don't look at that. I had been saying that it was a couple million people up until I saw Fargo War, saw that McNamara himself put it at 3.4 million people. The Vietnamese have a much more accurate count. They put it at 5 million people.
This is really, and I think we should see some of that film. And I would like to ask our listeners to observe and our viewers to see a clip from your film. So we can go ahead with that now if that's all right with you folks, and then we'll be able to talk about it.
Okay, that's good.
LBJ wanted to expand the war, but the resolution he had put to Congress had been shelved for months.
What I want is somebody that can lay up some plans to trap these guys and whip hell out of them, kill some of them. That's what I want to do.
I'll try and bring something back that will meet that objective.
Okay, Bob.
After what he called an unprovoked attack, he got his resolution.
Congressional leaders of both parties supported the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. In fact, only 2 members of Congress voted against the resolution, Senators Morse of Oregon and Greening of Alaska.
Being in the minority never proves that you're wrong. In fact, history is going to record that Senator Greening and I voted in the interest of the American people this morning when we voted against this resolution. And I'd have the American people remember what this resolution really is. It's a resolution which seeks to give the President of the United States the power to make war without a declaration of war.
The Gulf of Tonkin resolution was not a declaration of war. There never was a declaration of war in Vietnam, but it served much the same purpose. The President was given broad powers to wage war. But what the Congress did not know, what the country did not know, is that the second attack in the Gulf of Tonkin may never have happened.
It is now known beyond any reasonable doubt that an attack did not take place. Even the official U.S. Navy history states there was actually no North Vietnamese attack that night.
If one telegram, which we later found from Commander Herrick of the Maddox, had been made available to the committee at that time, I'm quite sure they would have had long hearings, gone into it thoroughly, and if they'd been able to discover the facts as they actually were, I don't believe it'd passed the resolution, because it was based upon absolutely false, erroneous information. The events as they related them of August the 4th, 1964 were not true. Our ships it was not an unprovoked, deliberate attack. In fact, there was no attack at all.
Did the captains report what they were ordered to report?
It's also been suggested that Washington was putting a great deal of pressure on you to come up with some positive answers to what happened that night. A positive answer being, yes, we were attacked.
Well, I'm sure they needed one, and that's what we were trying to obtain for them, and we did, and sent it in.
Did the gunner shell an empty Gulf?
Just above the bridge of the Maddox, where Captain Herrick was, is the main gun director. And inside the director was the sailor who was in charge of firing those powerful 5-inch guns. His job was to open fire once the enemy targets were spotted on radar or sonar. Those are the main methods for detecting targets you can't see directly. The man in charge of the main gun director, August 4th, 1964, was a 4-year veteran. He was also an expert sonar man, Patrick Park. Park is now a businessman in Los Angeles.
Tell me, do you think that night, August 4th, in the pitch black, in a heavy swell, rainstorms, was there anything to shoot at out there?
No, I don't. I'm certain that there was not anything to shoot at, right from the beginning. The captain asked me immediately after the attack to go down and evaluate all the recordings that had been made of noise that sonar was reporting. And I kept myself pretty busy for the next 3 days, really, trying to evaluate these things and determine if we had heard anything that might have been even a question mark, that it might have been a torpedo or anything else in the water not related to the two ships or noise of either one of them.
And what was your evaluation?
Absolutely nothing.
The pilots didn't see anything either. Before James Bond Stockdale became a North Vietnamese prisoner of war, he was flying air cover over the destroyers at the time of the alleged second attack.
In Stockdale's words, "I flew so low there was salt spray on my windshield, and I still didn't see a thing," meaning he never saw torpedoes or any evidence that the U.S. ships had been fired upon. The captain of the Ticonderoga's Attack Squadron 56, Commander Wesley L. McDonald, concurred. He didn't see anything that night except the Maddox and the Turner Joy. After this flight, he and those in his command met behind closed doors, and each wrote accounts of what they did and did not see. Stockdale then locked these reports in his safe. The next morning, Commander James Stockdale was ordered to lead the first U.S. airstrike on North Vietnam.
I personally am convinced in my own mind that no attack took place on the 4th. But of course it's impossible really in a way for me to prove a negative. I'll put it this way. They most certainly did not prove the affirmative case that there was an attack.
Since there was no second attack, and since that attack was the excuse that the president used to take the U.S. to war in Vietnam, what are we to make of the following recently released White House tape? In it, LBJ and McNamara discuss the second Gulf of Tonkin attack before it takes place. How would they know about the attack before it happened? And why would they want to keep that prior knowledge a secret? Unless they were planning it.
Now, this is an action that we might well wish to consider after the second attack, but I think it would be inappropriate, General Wheeler agrees and Dean Rusk agrees, inappropriate to provide the task force commander that authority. There will be ample time for us after a second attack to bring this problem to your attention. You can then decide how far you wish to pursue the attacker into his base area.
But I wish we could have something that we've already picked out and just hit about 3 of them damn quick right after.
We will have that, and I talked to Mac Bundy a moment ago and told him that I thought that was the most important subject we should consider today, and be prepared to recommend to you a response, a retaliation move against North Vietnam in the event this attack takes place within the next 6 to 9 hours. And
now we better do that at lunch. There's some things I don't want to go in with these other. I want to keep this as close as I can. So let's just try to keep it to the 2 or 3.
I will be prepared to do so at lunch.
On the night of August 4th, the United States made public the so-called Gulf of Tonkin incident. But the story was a fabrication created by the U.S. National Security Council. Even as the National Security Council met, American aircraft were being sent to destroy several areas of our country. In reality, the second Gulf of Tonkin incident never happened.
Was the whole basis of this war a fraud and a lie perpetrated at the highest levels of our government? We must ask ourselves that as we survey the damage that was done to our country, and especially the damage done to the Vietnamese.
Vietnam, American Holocaust. a war started by way of lies.
Not the first time, not the last time, unfortunately.
It seems that many wars are started by contrivances. President Polk said Mexico invaded the United States. Abe Lincoln, as a congressman, said they did not. You're a liar. General Grant said they did not. You're lying, President Polk. We have seen this time and time again, and it still goes on. And think of the lives that are involved here.
Right.
Destroyed, country destroyed. And at the very moment we're talking, this is going on in Iraq. We have destroyed that country for 18 years.
Right.
In case people forgot, it started in January of 1991. And we're still killing people. You know, there was talk about Mumbai and that disaster recently. Well,
Right.
we've had a Mumbai every day in Iraq for
right,
18
yeah.
years. So I'm glad you made this film.
It's a policy that we have to change in this country. It's long overdue for a change. I think part of that change is recognizing what we did in the past.
We have to.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a whole series, frankly, of American Holocausts.
You know,
Korea was another 5 million.
Yes.
And,
I think our problem is that war has become sacred. It's become sacred with our study of the Revolutionary War, with our study of the Civil War.
Right.
I think starting with kindergarten, that we should be asking our young people in class, how could that war have been avoided? Canada wasn't part of the Revolutionary War. They have a nice country.
Right.
You know, how could the Civil War have been avoided?
Right.
World War I had no reason whatsoever, except a lot of new arms had been created. They had poison gas, they had the machine gun, they had huge cannons, and they wanted to use them and make some money.
Right.
There was no reason for World War I, and it was extended into World War II.
Right.
So we can't continue like this, Clay.
No, no. The wars are a destructive process,
yeah.
and they destroy life. They destroy what we've created, and to live in a system that requires that to sustain itself. And I think, unfortunately, this is the problem, the central problem, really, with the U.S. economy now, is what brought us out of the Great Depression was really the arms industry, the preparation for World War II. And then since then, it's continued. But now even that can't sustain the economy. I think this is the lesson. Even the outrageous spending in Iraq and Afghanistan, it's not productive spending. It can't sustain the economy.
Well, this is what our people have to see. That is the relationship between the economic meltdown and our wars, our endless, permanent war economy. Because you can't pay troops in Korea for 50 years who have produced nothing without having the whole monetary system go down. A house that was $50,000 becomes $500,000. Every useful item escalates in value. And the number of people that are destroyed in the process is unacceptable.
Right.
So you've helped to bring this out. Now you're on your way to Vietnam.
Right.
What are you going to do over there?
I'm going to tour the country. I'm also going to collect material and do some filming for part 2. This is actually a 2-part project. The first part, which you just saw a clip from, Vietnam American Holocaust. We just had the premiere on that November 8th. And that goes into this horrific destruction, this war that was waged against the Vietnamese people that led to really so much destruction in that country and the killing of like 5 million people. But, you know, the other side of that story is they won. They did, you know. After many thousands of years, in 75, Vietnam was, for the first time, ruled by Vietnamese.
I think it's time for us to realize that we have been in a process of losses since Korea. The Korean War is not over. There is no ceasefire.
Right.
There's a ceasefire, but no armistice.
Right.
No termination of the war. So that war is still in process, which has been lost for all purposes. Vietnam was an absolute loss.
Right.
We lost in Central America. The people we killed are now their relatives, you might say, are now in charge of Nicaragua, El Salvador, Guatemala, etc. These are losses. We have lost definitively in Iraq. We are about to go into Afghanistan with a larger surge. Afghanistan for centuries has been known as the swamp. You go in, you don't come out. 14,000 British soldiers went in over 100 years ago. One came out alive.
And the Russians lost so many people there and killed many people there, and now we're replacing them.
Yeah, we changed our alliances. We were friends with the Taliban. We wanted them to help us overthrow the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. Now they're our enemies. Now they have 70% of Afghanistan under their control. Each time we attack, more Taliban grow. The people didn't like them and don't like them, but they like them more than they like us.
Right, yeah. At least they are people, and and I think in each country these issues have to be fought out among the people, not necessarily fought out in a violent way, but even if it is a violent way, it has to be resolved by the national population, and that needs to be free of foreign interference and intervention, which is, of course, what the U.S. has done so many different places around the world.
Hundreds of times in Latin America. You don't win an occupation. You lose an occupation.
Right.
Now, what is your second phase about? And you're going to Vietnam.
It's called
you're going
Vietnam.
To phase 2.
It's called Vietnam People's Victory.
Okay.
So, one of the great stories that remains to be, well, there are many stories that remain to be told about how the Vietnamese won the war. Very few people in this country, well, we know about the Ho Chi Minh Trail, we know about the Viet Cong, but do we really understand how they organized a population to fight for their freedom and independence, or the degree of it? So that's one aspect of it. But they were supported in their struggle by people around the world. There was a strong peace movement in this country that was opposed to the war and supported the Vietnamese. And of course, Jane Fonda took a lot of flack for going to North Vietnam during the war, but she was on the right side of that struggle. She was on the winning side. And myself and many others in this country were involved in the anti-war movement. We supported the Vietnamese in their liberation struggle. We supported bringing our boys home. And our boys also revolted against the war. The GI resistance was an important part of how the Vietnamese were able to win their independence.
There was a mutiny in Vietnam.
There was.
I've been getting reports of that mutiny for years in my classes from people who were there, from veterans who were there. There's also a mythology that I understand. There's a professor who served as an infantryman in Vietnam. He wrote the book Spitting Image. And he said, this image of everybody spitting at the veterans is Pentagon propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
He said, we had a very warm relationship with the peace movement. And now there may have been a few cuckoos out there that were spitting, but he said this was not the general relationship. I mean, I remember the coffee houses, the friends.
Right.
We looked upon it as we do today. These young people are not there. We don't support them by keeping them there. They didn't want to be there, and they'd like to come home. So if we support them, bring them home. And they're in the position of a slave, actually.
Right.
They are told, keep your mouth shut, follow orders, do what you're told.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the way you speak to a slave.
Yeah.
And that's not okay.
And they're recruited, of course. At the time of the Vietnam War, they had the draft, so, a lot of people didn't really have a choice. At least by law, they didn't have a choice. Many people took a choice to go to Canada, go to jail, or otherwise, avoid military service and participation in the war. But so many people were drafted. Now we've gotten rid of the draft, but we have these recruiters to go into the high schools and basically tell lies to young people that don't know better. In my film, in Vietnam American Holocaust, we document the youngest American soldier killed in Vietnam. He was 15-year-old, a black Marine. And you wonder, if he was killed at 15, how old was he when he was recruited?
Sure.
And who recruited him? And how did that happen? We talk about child soldiers, but what is that?
It's child soldiers.
Yeah, and then we show, you know, young Laotians as young as 10 years old hired to fight on the American side.
Well, that's part and parcel of the game is the lie all the way through. And this applies to the recruiting. Today they're going to the poorest schools.
Right.
They talk education. They talk excitement. They talk fun. And that's not what you're there for. And they're not getting an education when they come back.
No, they're not
it's
getting
not
that
happening. They're being lied to. Some have been told, well, if you join the reserve, you'll never have to go to Iraq. Well, that's a flat-out lie. And they stalk them. They call them at home. They visit their homes. They bring little gifts for them. It's really unbelievable. And so we're so fortunate to have organizations here in L.A. That are opposing this.
Right,
and that are bringing these points out. Because there's also the matter of the bombing, you know. I mean, we talked about Senator McCain as a war hero. Well, you know, there was a general who had retired but was in Vietnam. I think it was General Taylor. He said, I would have indicted all these guys who flew over Hanoi and bombed. He said, because at Nuremberg, we said this is a crime against humanity. You can't do this. These are war criminals, as far as one of our generals is concerned, who presided at Nuremberg. So I think we have to review what a war hero is.
Right. A war hero, to me, is not someone who flies over a country bombing civilian targets, bombing civilians. You know, in a third world country that is only fighting, that represents no threat, has made no attack on the United States, Gulf of Tonkin incident aside, and is only fighting for its independence. And to go over and bomb and kill children sleeping in their beds, to me, that does not make you a hero. We have another name for that. You know, if he didn't come in an airplane, we would call him terrorist.
Oh, yeah, it was terrorism.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any question about it. Napalm is terrorism.
Agent Orange is
Agent
terrorism
Orange.
that continues to this day.
Dioxin, one of the most toxic substances known, is still in the soil.
Right.
And our veterans are still suffering from it. Some of it are still dying from it.
Right.
One died the other day from dioxin poisoning. I remember that case. And so you poison the land, you poison the people. And what for? For a lie? What in the world did we think we were doing over
Money.
Yeah. Well, we didn't
Lots
get the
of
money. It didn't happen that way. We're broke. We're bankrupt. We're a defeated empire at this moment.
Oh, yeah.
And so the question is, why is there no learning process? We hear the same babble from generals in Iraq that we heard from Westmoreland. Westmoreland was saying, I just need 750,000 troops and we can win.
Right.
The President Bush, the old president, is talking about winning. We didn't win.
Yeah, right.
What did we win? I mean, this is a terrible fantasy. And it still goes on.
Right, yeah.
No learning process.
I don't think they see a way for them to preserve their power and wealth. I think that's the key thing. The country as a whole did not benefit from the Vietnam War. It's not benefiting from the Iraq War. But certain corporations and certain individuals, they benefit mightily. And to the extent they control our media, to the extent they control our politics, I think that's why we don't learn. The country as a whole, I think, has learned. The country as a whole didn't want to go into Iraq and would like to bring our troops out. And if we were truly a democracy, we wouldn't be there.
Well, this is the problem we're going to have to deal with now. That is that the Congress works for these corporations. The lobbyists have more power than our civilians do. So who is winning? Some of the same entities that won in Vietnam. Brown and Root won in Vietnam, billions. Bechtel is winning billions in Iraq. Halliburton is winning billions for rebuilding Iraq and not doing it.
Right.
I'll accept your $40 billion for rebuilding, and we will do nothing. Thank you very much. This is theft and murder that we're dealing with here. It has to be looked upon that way. We simply have to get into the indictments of those criminals that are responsible for these wars so that they never happen again.
Right.
The military of the world at peace is the greatest polluter of the planet. And I say at peace because of all the junk they make and all the toxicity. The military of the world at war and the planet are not sustainable.
Yeah.
You can't have it. So I really appreciate what you're doing. And I hope you have a great trip over there, and we really look forward to seeing this new film.
Yes, yes. I think it will be exciting and interesting. And while American Holocaust is necessarily kind of a downer because of the subject matter, I think this second part will be very uplifting because you'll see, in spite of Agent Orange, in spite of, you know, all these horrific things, the Vietnamese won, and they won with international support, even in our own military. That's a great story.
Oh, it is. It's an amazing story, and people should get into our history books the fact that the troops refused to fight at the end.
Right.
I got reports of troops saying, you know, you want me to go out and search and destroy? I'm not going out at all.
Right.
And we quit.
You officer, if you want to go that way, you can go.
Yeah.
But me and the rest of the boys are going to go over here. We're not
Clay
going to kill
Claiborne,
civilians.
thank you so much for being with us today, and I wish you great success in your filmmaking, and we look forward to your return from Vietnam.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.